Welcome to Climate Quickies, bite-sized nuggets of climate goodness from our TEDxLondon experts in under 5 minutes.
In this week's Climate Curious, recorded live at TED, we're asking, what the frack is fracking? It's something oil and gas campaigner Sven has dedicated most of his life to stopping in his beautiful home of British Columbia, Canada. Let's head over to Sven to hear more. Stay curious.
So we are recording at TED in Vancouver, and one of my favorite things that happens when we're here is we just get to meet lots of awesome people doing really cool things that we wouldn't have gotten to know otherwise. And one of those people is Sven. He has been at Stand.Earth for 10 years and is the Canadian Oil and Gas Program Director. A born and raised Londoner, London, Ontario. See what I did there?
Lousy London.
Sven came west in late 1999 and quickly fell in love with BC, which we can understand because it's beautiful here. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I have to admit, I know nothing about fracking. And you were introduced to me as the human who knows everything about fracking. So can you, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Tell me a little bit about, let's imagine, because I don't know anything about it, what is fracking? And why are you talking about it on a climate podcast?
Well, so fracking is an extreme form of oil and gas extraction. We are running out of what we call conventional oil and gas. This is a new way to get more fossil fuels out of the ground. Like all extreme forms of energy, it's a lot more energy intensive, a lot more climate intensive, a lot more water intensive, especially.
Wow. And so it means it's even more damaging in the way that it's extracted, as well as the actual product being damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. It poisons tons of water, about 36 Olympic swimming pools for every well that is fracked.
That's huge.
It is a lot of water. And that water is poisoned and usually taken out of the water cycle forever because it is so dangerous after it's been used by industry. Okay.
I have so many questions, but we're here in British Columbia, right? In Canada. And it's so beautiful here that you can't it's so naive, right? But you can't imagine that anyone would want to do anything to destroy this incredible environment and that you have. But I heard that, I think you told me this, that BC at the moment is the second biggest state in North America expanding its fracking, only after Texas. Is that right?
Yeah, so BC is one of the centers of fracking because of LNG, or liquefied natural gas. There's a proposal to build 6 LNG terminals up and down Canada's west coast, including right here in the Vancouver area.
Wow.
And because of that, we're going to need to more than double the amount of gas that we're fracking in this province to supply those terminals. Northeastern BC, which is kind of like the farthest corner of our province away from where we are now, sits on top of something called the Montney Shale deposit. And that is the largest carbon bomb in Canada.
Wow.
And the 6th largest carbon bomb in the world.
Explain to people if they haven't heard that term before. What is a carbon bomb?
So carbon bomb is a deposit of fossil fuels that is currently unexploited or unextracted that is larger than a gigaton. So literally, if these projects go ahead and this carbon is extracted, it's like setting off a bomb in our atmosphere.
And a gigaton is equivalent to what? If someone was trying to imagine how much pollution we're talking about there.
It is about 10 years of all the emissions from Canada.
Wow. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
There's so much out there. When I first started this work, I really didn't even understand that natural gas was a problem because I had the word natural in it and I thought this is going to be fine. This is deliberate, right? Tell me a little bit about this, what is happening, this evolution of gas and in relation to other fossil fuels.
So, I think the industry is transitioning away from more carbon intense traditional forms of fossil fuels, coal especially.
Right.
And they're looking for alternatives to that, but they want to kind of keep the party going and continue doing business the way they always have. So we see companies, big multinational oil companies like Shell, talk about how they're not an oil company anymore, they're a gas company now. Like this has solved the problem. But really what they've done is just moved the problem down the road a little bit. They kicked the can down the road. And given the timelines we have with climate change, we can't afford to extend the life of this industry and just keep looking for new sources of oil and gas. And that's what fracking is. It's finding a new source of oil and gas to continue extracting and continue growing emissions and the problem.
Well, we don't need to do that. We have alternatives. I'm assuming, right? We can go renewable. We can do something else other than frack for more gas.
Absolutely. I mean, the things that we use natural gas for now mostly are generating electricity, which solar and wind are both cheaper alternatives than burning natural gas and building new natural gas plants. And here in BC, a lot of our gas ends up going to the tar sands in Alberta to be used in things like in situ extraction, which is kind of like fracking for tar sands. You pump steam underground, melt the tar sands, and then pump it to the surface. That uses a ton of natural gas to boil all that water.
What is a tar sand?
So the tar sands are one of the world's largest oil deposits. It's in northern Alberta. Wow. It is a place where, like, usually oil is trapped underground in a geological formation. Here, the oil has basically escaped, mixed with sand, and formed this kind of like peanut butter, messy stuff that in Canada we've been mining since the 70s. And then putting it through an energy-intensive process to turn it into synthetic crude. We've run out of the mineable stuff, and now we're literally cooking the earth to extract.
So what you're telling me is that we're using an extremely harmful and polluting form of extraction to create one fossil fuel to use to extract another extremely harmful and like difficult to get to type of fossil fuel.
Yeah, these they're just kind of like stacking Jenga blocks on top of each other.
Right. One of the things that I had heard about fracking was that in addition to it being very polluting, it's also very dangerous.
Yeah, so fracking, it contaminates groundwater.
Right.
It causes earthquakes.
Okay, that's just not acceptable.
It's kind of bonkers. And because fracking wells have a very short lifespan, you need to drill a lot of them to continue to supply gas. So
it's also really inefficient.
It's really inefficient. It's more expensive than conventional oil or gas, and it is it destroys the landscape. So if you get a chance ever to visit the Peace River country, which is where almost all of the fracking is in BC, it's a beautiful place. It has one of the largest rivers in North America. The Peace River runs north to the Athabasca and then into the Arctic Ocean. It's a beautiful valley, farm country. But it is just pockmarked all over the place with well pads, gas plants, pipelines, all sorts of oil and gas infrastructure. And it's, really destroyed both the agricultural way of life there and for the local indigenous people has decimated their ability to hunt game, trap the way they have traditionally, and gather plants and medicines on their traditional territory.
This is what I was going to ask you is I'm like so much of Canada, there's like a really important First Nation kind of population that still like has so much their lives are so tied to what these parts of the country, right? This is obviously destroying land that's already been taken from them, but now they can't even use it in the way that they've been using it for thousands of years.
Yeah, it's, when you talk to Indigenous people, and I've had the opportunity to work closely with a few nations, they talk about how their connection to the land is kind of inseparable. They are part of the land. They can't live anywhere else. And if there were to be a natural or climate disaster, they don't feel they can leave because this place is part of them. So when you talk to somebody who says, for generations, my family has hunted this land, we catch moose here, it sustains us, it's an important part of our kind of like annual cycle. And I can't do that anymore because when we do catch moose, they're full of tumors and they're sick And we know that feeding that
Wow.
food to our children and our elders is dangerous.
I mean, that is very sad. So this is not just a carbon climate issue. This is a climate justice issue, really, when it comes down to it. Well, this is all very depressing. Tell me, but I know that you guys do great work. So tell me, here, and I guess as a model, maybe more globally, what is being done and how are you fighting this here in BC?
So we organize with communities all around the province through a network called Frack Free BC. And we're modeled that off successful campaigns that have been run in places like New York, California, many jurisdictions all across the world, including the United Kingdom, have banned fracking.
Yes, we almost unbanned it for like a microsecond, but it's been banned again.
Yeah,
it was a scary day.
Liz Truss had a lot of bad ideas.
She had a lot of bad ideas. Luckily, she lasted less than lettuce, so we're good.
Dodged a bullet there. Yeah. So we're working to with communities all across the province to ban fracking here too, and that is our end goal. There's some key decisions coming up that have to be made around these LNG terminals I was speaking of, and that is, I think, going to be a pivot point for whether or not fracking is allowed to continue to expand in this province or not. We live in a pretty progressive place, a beautiful place.
Right.
People take a lot of pride in being from British Columbia and how beautiful it is. And this is, I think, one of the most present threats to that. So we've been working hard to make sure that people understand that and save this place, not just because it's imperative for our climate, but because it's part of who we are as British Columbians.
And I guess a national level, if Canada wants to consider itself a climate leader, it cannot do these things.
Yeah, I mean, Canada is an interesting case, right? We think of ourselves in the world as a leader on issues like human rights, the environment, climate change. But we have a pretty spotty record, especially when it comes to climate, because we're an oil and gas producer. We're now a third of our emissions comes from just extracting oil and gas.
Wow.
And that is the largest and fastest growing source of emissions in our country.
Yeah.
And as long as big oil has control of our politics, and they do in many ways, that is going to be hard to change. But I think Canadians don't see themselves as part of that problem and are fighting back in a lot of different ways all across the country.
That's awesome news. And a really good example, of the fact that you can fight back, right? This is not inevitable, that these companies can just do whatever they want to do. Yeah,
I mean, we have stopped big projects before like these, and we're going to stop them again. But we need, folks all over the world to kind of wake up to what is the future of energy and stop buying Canadian oil and gas because it is not safer or cleaner than other sources of energy.
Right.
The truth is that the climate doesn't care where the oil comes from. And the best way to protect our futures is to break our dependency on fossil fuels, regardless of where they're extracted.
It has been such a pleasure to speak to you. So I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this quickie.
This episode was created by our superstar podcast team at TEDxLondon. Until next time,
stay curious.